today Eric Torigian. Eric and I have known each other for a number of years, and I am just so pleased he is here to address our group. He's one of the professionals in our community that is really schooled, knowledgeable, experienced in so many aspects of human resources and labor relations. From the CHRO level, he cut his teeth in labor relations at Ford. He's been with really great companies. Currently, he's the CHRO at Akebono. But more importantly, for the meeting today, Eric has been reaching out to individuals and to organizations to share his wisdom in the area of career management and career development. And I would encourage all of you to take a look at his LinkedIn profile. You'll see he has information there, but he does do a blog series, and he has a separate organization where he tells people about career development, career management. I'm looking at one of them now called Lessons from the Corner Office. And I'm hoping he's going to share some of those lessons from the corner office as it relates to career management. Eric, if you have anything else you want to say before you start it, I'll turn it over to you now.
Thanks, Bob.
At the end of your presentation, we'll open it up for Q&A.
No, I really appreciate it. Thank you, and good morning to everyone. And I'm really excited to have this honor and this chance to come in here and talk to everybody. And I think Bob's spot on a couple things there. First, I know I cut my teeth in labor relations, and I know this organization, you know what that means. And when you say that, it means something, I think, very strong. And it's a place where I think in HR, it's starting to become a lost skill, and we're becoming dinosaurs in some levels. And, you know, I cut mine in automotive and UAW and steel mills and the United States steel workers and closing plants in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I mean, you talk about the hard and difficult assignments, those were them. But doing them led me somewhere. And I always had a path, and I always had a vision, and I was always taking proactive steps towards that ultimate goal. And that's what I think is missing today. And when you look at business school, we do a very good job of preparing people for a lot of different things. We teach people how to be strategic. We teach you how to, use logic and how to be a good labor relations and build relationships. But we never teach you how to manage your career. So instead of having a 30-year progressive career where you grow and do the work you love, you end up getting 1 year of experience 30 times over, and you end up frustrated. And that's what I don't want to have happen to people. So I have set up an organization, and it's called Lessons from the Corner Office. And it's really just my way to look back into the community and help others around me and help people take those proactive steps. Beyond that, people are hurting now, and there's been a lot of people who've been negatively impacted. I believe, same as Cheryl, I believe that this is not the worst thing that's ever happened to us, but it's the greatest opportunity we've ever been handed. And I think you've got to be able to take that look at the world and say, this is a wonderful opportunity. I'm going to maximize it. So with that, I'm going to kind of dive in here and make a little bit of a transition. One of the quotes that I like to use whenever I'm giving this topic is, if you wait until you're ready, you'll wait forever. And that was by Will Rogers. And I think it's just a great sentence, and it just has so much meaning now. And I talk to so many people who will tell me, well, I need my MBA, but I'm 45. Okay. So let's think about that. So let's say you spend 3 years getting your MBA and you're 45. I'll be 48 years old now, just be graduating with my MBA. Then what? So, well, here, I got something to tell you. 3 years from now, you're going to be 48. And if you don't start today, you're going to be 48 without your MBA. How is that going to feel? So you've got to take action now. We did a 5Y and an 8D, used a lot of our analytical Six Sigma tools and did a really deep study. And what we learned was the root cause of change is actually taking an action. You've got to take action before anything happens, before anything changes. You also need, though, a roadmap. If you don't have a roadmap, you can't get to wherever you're going. We go down to Florida every year, every so, and we always drive, and we still get the roadmap. And I grew up in the era where we would go to AAA and we would get the road trips, the trip ticks, and we would get all those maps and we would lay them all out. And this is probably where my planning nature came from. My dad and I would sit at the kitchen table and we would lay it out and say, okay, if we leave at this time, we'll be in this city by this time, we'll be in this city by that time. And then we would sit and we would look at the maps as we were driving and say, how are we doing? Are we plus? Are we minus? Where are we headed? This is what growing up with a dad who was an engineer at NASA does to you. But it was fun. And you know what? We had a roadmap and we had a plan and we had a destination. We knew where we were headed. We knew the roads we were going to take. We knew how long it was going to take. And we had guide posts along the way. That's what I want everyone to do with your career to begin with. You need to right now, and unlike most presentations and most speakers who ever talk to you, I actually want you to get your phone out. So I want everyone to have your phone out in front of you right now. And I want you to start an email. And in this email, I want you to write an email to me. And my personal email is eric@torigian.com, TORIGIAN.com. Carbon copy yourself. The subject should be my action plan or my changes or what I'm going to do, anything like that. I want you, as we go through the presentation, to write down things that are meaningful to you, things that you want to change, things that you're going to work on. And I'm going to go through it and I'm going to reply back to you and we're going to start a narrative on it and a discussion. But I want you to take good notes. This is my first job, I worked for a labor supervisor who this was 1991 and he had 38 years of experience, something like that. I used to always do the math and he basically went back he started in the late 60s, early 60s, late 50s. And he was just a good old fashioned labor relations, hard-nosed, simple terminology person. And he used to always tell me, the dullest pencil beats the sharpest mind. So I want you to write things down and take notes. So who are you going to be and when are you going to get there? That's the first question you need to be able to answer for yourself. I'm going to be a CHRO of a mid-sized company that's in the automotive manufacturing space in the next 10 years. You need that specificity. And you need to write it down and you need to enunciate it to the world. And you need to say it out loud and actualize it. Once you have it written down and once you know where you're headed, then we're going to start to work on what I call the career gap analyzer. And I have tools for all of this stuff. Again, if you ask me for them, I'll hand them all over to you. I'm very open with them. I want to see everyone be successful. So I'm happy to share any of this with you. But the career gap analyzer, what we're going to do is we're going to actualize who you want to be and when you want to get there. So on this tool, you're going to write that down. I am going to be CHRO and it's going to be in this lumber period. This is the size of the company it's going to be working for. Now, your first assignment becomes this. Go on LinkedIn. Look up at least 10 of these people. And you could probably find even more. So I want you to go find 10 CHROs in the automotive space. Use your Google searching tools. There's a lot more on the internet than cat pictures. Just dig in and dig around. Once you find these 10 people, I want you to look at their experiences, their education. What have they done to get to where they are today? I'll guarantee you one of the things that most good CHROs have done is some form of labor relations. It's starting to get thinner and thinner and thinner, but it's still there. If you look at the really big roles, the really key CHROs, the really strategic roles, they still have some labor.
Hey, Eric.
Robert. Yeah.
We're going to have people on this call that are in and outside of HR. So we're going to have some engineers. We're going to have some people in the art and design. We're going to have some lawyers as well. So don't forget to include them as well.
And perfect. And this is what I love about this technique is it works for anything. And I tend to tailor it to HR because I talk to a lot of HR people, but it works anywhere. If you want to be the design engineer of the 2025 Mustang, you write that down and then you go look at who are these people. So who are automotive design engineers? If you want to be a landscape design professional, I don't know right terminology for it because I'm not in the industry, but you should. You write that down and you say that. And then we're going to go find those people. We're going to find people who are like that. And if you're creating white space, then we're going to go find people that define the edges of the white space. In there, though, you're going to start to develop a list, and that's why I call this the career gap analyzer. You're going to develop a list of things that people have in those roles that you don't have yet. And what this becomes is, this is the things that a company would brag about hiring you for. So your next assignment is to write your announcement for your dream job. So sit down and write, PepsiCo is excited to announce today that we have hired Eric Torigian as our next CHRO. Eric joins us after a 30+ year career in manufacturing, returns to us after 12 years. You're going to write all those details out. What will that company brag about? Why are they happy to have you? What are you going to be doing for that company, for their bottom line? We've hired today Steven Schwartz as our head design engineer. He's going to be leading up the Mustang project in 2027. And we're really excited to see his blend of artistic and automotive design and whatever those things are. Now you're going to use that and predict back, and we're going to build your roadmap. So your next tool is the career gap planner. So now you take all of those gaps that you've identified and all those things that a company would brag about why they hired you, and you're going to populate them onto this tool. This tool then says, so let's say one of your career gaps is lead a major project of 100 or more people. Okay, now you say the next column is, what's my experience? Well, my experience is I've only led a team of 10 people. So now you have to say, how do I gain that experience? And there's multiple different ways to gain experiences. One might be the next job I look at needs to have a larger team. Or maybe I need to join a volunteer in the community where I can lead a team. Or maybe I need to be part of my church group where I can take a group of 25 people and lead the choir team. Is that relevant work experience? Sure is. It demonstrates your abilities. And that's what this is going to do. You're going to identify how you're going to get this experience and how you're going to demonstrate it. And then most importantly, I want you to populate the timing. When are you going to do this? So now you should know what you need to do, how you're going to go about doing it, and when you're going to try to get it. So let's say, for example, you are an HR person and you're sitting out there and you're in year 5 of your career and you've gone the normal route. So you started as a generalist or an analyst or a consultant, and you've done a little bit of benefits, but you don't know anything about labor relations yet. Okay, so if you're going to say that labor relations is critical to getting to the top job, which it absolutely is, then when are you going to go get that experience? If you do like some of my peers and wait until you're in a director level role, it's going to be incredibly difficult for you to get labor relations experience that's meaningful, because you're going to have to do one of two things. You're going to have to either step into a role that's well beneath the level that you're at today to get this critical experience, or you're not going to get the experience for real, right? So if you try to say I'm a director and I'm going to go join a company as their director of labor relations, and I can't even spell union, well, then you're going to struggle and the company's going to struggle. But if I were to hire you and say, okay, Mr. Director of HR, I'll bring you in, but you're going to be a labor relations associate and you're going to sit in my manufacturing plant and you're going to answer grievances and handle overtime meetings, it's going to be difficult to do. Now, I will say having a roadmap makes that more palatable. So if you know how this fits into your future experience, it makes it easier to do. But it also challenges you now when you have a longer road to make sure you're getting those experiences where you can get them. So I want to pause there and talk about a very difficult subject. And this just happened. A person, and I do podcasts with them, and we're very active together and very active in the community, reached out to me and said, my spouse just lost their job and they're devastated. They don't know what to do. Can you help? So I sat down with them and we started to make a plan. And I said, this really could be your greatest opportunity if you see it that way. The worst thing you can do right now is panic and just grab something. You've been given an opportunity to stop and get some critical experience. Let's pause and take that experience. That's what this tool is going to do for you. It's always going to give you that comfort level of saying, I have a plan. I'm taking actionable steps. If something bad happens and you find yourself out of your current role or something like that happens, you stop, you say to yourself, okay, nah, but thank you. Now I can go and take on my next step, and I can go find my next challenge, and I can fill in the next box on my map, and I can continue to take my progressive steps towards my future. So I'm going to pause there and see, does anyone have any questions, any thoughts before we move on to the next topic, which I think is really important.
So for those of you on the call that are looking at your chat, I've put Eric's email address in the chat. So if you didn't get it on the first round, it's in the chat. There is a question, how badly can I mess up in getting my first launching pad job? For example, if I want to end up doing human-centered design research in the urban space, how big of a mistake would it be to become a design and release engineer for closures at a big OEM?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. And I love that question because it shows you how open your options are today. So I'm going to use an analogy because I love them. I think that they paint pictures so well. When we were going to go to the moon, we had a vision and a path. So for a lot of reasons, they chose that eastern shore of Florida to launch, right? What if that was a misstep? What if the better place to launch would have been California's coast? Okay, on that journey to the moon, how much would that 1,000, 1,800, 2,000 miles have mattered? Probably not a lot. You probably would have changed some angles, and you had a lot of time and a long journey to adjust and adapt. So right now, I wouldn't worry too much as an entry level. Now, if you're getting ready for translunar injection and you need to make that last engine burn to get onto the right pattern, when you're 1,000 miles away from the moon, 10,000 miles, now that matters, right? So now it becomes more critical, but you have a lot more experience. So things get more critical as you get deeper in your career, as you get closer to your ultimate goal, but you have the benefit of having a lot more experience at the same time as well. And I saw in the chat box, my chat box pops up and disappears pretty quickly, but I love the analogy of flight and being a pilot. And I always use this analogy. When I was learning how to fly, I felt like I was chasing that thing everywhere. We were all over bouncing all over the place. And I'm doing all of this, bang, 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 bang. And the instructor that I had was in his 70s, easily, if not older, and been flying his whole life. And you'd watch him, he's barely even doing anything. And one day on the ground, we were talking about it. And I said, Bob, how do you do that? Like, how are you making those inputs so smoothly when I'm chasing them and struggling with those inputs? He said, I'm making them sooner than you are. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, when you're running down the road, do you wait until your fender's rubbing up against the concrete median until you start to get back in your lane? I said, no, as soon as I start to drift, I correct it. The same thing in the airplane. You got to be paying attention to the things that indicate you're drifting and then correct those. That's what your career planner is going to do for you. It's an indicator of where you're drifting in your career, and it gives you the opportunity to make an input. If you make a lot of small inputs, you don't have to make big dramatic ones. And that's what you'll watch in someone who's identified as being very smooth. They make a lot of smaller inputs. And what does the military always say? Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So you practice and you plan small. You input those quickly, and then those smooth out over time, and you don't have to make the large dramatic changes. Awesome question. I think that question opens up so much, and it's such a great place to start. Networking is critical. Networking is one of those places where you need to start early and often and do it. So when something happens, like that person I referenced earlier, they ended up on the street with no network. Now we were able to connect them pretty quickly and got a pretty healthy network around them, and they found a new role very quickly. But it's never too late to start. But if you wait until it happens, you've got more space now that you have to do an assignment before you can actually start. The number one thing to networking, and Robert and I have talked about this for a long time, you have to be a net giver. You cannot be a net taker. When Robert asked me to do this presentation, I was like, oh my God, absolutely. I would love a chance to talk to everybody because I am by nature a net giver. I try to give. Now, if I need something, I don't feel bad picking up the phone and calling Robert and saying, hey, I need some help with X, Y, Z. And he's always happy to say, hey, you know what? I'm a net giver as well. Let's work on that. Let's figure out how can we do it? How do we mutually make it beneficial? And how do we work through it? That's a network. And that's how you effectively leverage a professional network. I just crossed over yesterday into 11,000 connections on LinkedIn.
Oh.
If you want to talk to somebody, if you're trying to look at something and you're like, hey, look, Eric's connected to him, reach out to me. I will, number one, make an introduction for you. Number two, depending on how well I know the person, how deep that connection is, I'll go even further than that. I'll pick up the phone, call to people, talk to people, connect you with others. You know, we know people all around the industry. I'm connected to people who are even further connected. I do a podcast with a gentleman who's the president-elect of Michigan SHRM. He's connected to 11,000 people. You know, mutually, I think we looked at our networks one time and there was over 25,000 people. And you start to add all this together with the, there's 4 of us on this pod, and et cetera. You have access to these markets. You just don't realize it today. And how do you get that access? You become a net giver. You give back. LERA has incredible opportunities to get involved. Join them. Be part of these teams. Well, Eric, I can't really do very much. I can probably only give some administrative time. Great. You know what? Every group needs someone who can help do some, mail merges and spreadsheets and tracking and planning and order. There are opportunities for everybody to be involved. You just have to ask for them and take them and step in. So from a time perspective, I want to transition here to the next topic because I think it's very important. And that's what I call my time gap analysis tool. And unfortunately, I didn't have it in time to get it to Robert so he could put it on the screen, and I can't put it on the screen from my iPad. But it's a simple graph. And I want you to take 2 axes, and I want you to take the vertical axis and say, how much do you enjoy this activity? On the horizontal axis, you're going to graph how much do other people value this activity. And again, I have a tool, and if you ask me for it, I'll send it to you. But what this graph gives you now is 4 quadrants. So let's start in that upper right-hand quadrant, which is quadrant number 1. Those are the things that are very high on how much do you enjoy them and very high on how much do other people value them. So these are the things that you love doing that you can get paid for. That's your sweet spot. Moving to the left, you have the things that you really love to do, but other people don't necessarily put as much value in. Those are what I call your hobbies. When we drop down into quadrant number 3, those are the things that you don't like to do and other people don't value. And that's what I call your time wasters. And then the final quadrant, quadrant 4, which is the lower right-hand quadrant, those are the things that other people place a lot of value on, but you don't particularly care for. And I call that your dues. And sometimes you got to pay your dues and do the things you don't like that monetize so you get the right to move into your sweet spot. And that really creates 3 unique kind of patterns on this graph. The first one is sort of a crescent shape or a croissant shape that tips with the 2 tails. One tail is in the hobby zone. One tail is in quadrant number 4 where you do your dues. and the body of it is in your sweet spot. That's where you want to work. You want to be doing most of the work in your sweet spot. You want to dip down and do some of the work that you don't particularly care about, but that are you pay your dues. And like old manager of mine, Mel Baggett, used to always say, you know, there's a handful of things that you just have to do. And if you get those things done and you do them very well, it lets you do all those things that you love to do. So do your dues, pay your dues, and then that lets you live in your sweet spot. Now, the really fulfilled and actualized people know how to swing over and get some stuff from their hobby zone and monetize it. That should be your goal. The problem is where most people end up working is what I call in the ineffective zone. And the ineffective zone is a little bubble that lies right between quadrant 3 and quadrant 2. So they're working on things that people don't pay a lot of value for, and they don't, some of it they like, and some of it they don't really even care that much about. And they're just completely ineffective and they make no progress. There's one other zone that I want to put on here, which is what I call the unfulfilled zone. And the unfulfilled zone lies along the bottom of the vertical axis, maybe up to first third. You can, the shape varies. And then it's right evenly between time wasters and dues. And unfortunately, this unfulfilled zone is where most people spend their career. And the risk of this zone is organizations value what you're doing. So you're going to be, and I always think about it in a plant, and I had accounts payable sitting right outside from me and supply chain analysts. And I remember asking one time, why are you in supply chain? And she said, well, this is just where I started, and I've stayed here. And the company sees a lot of value in my work, so I just stay here and keep doing it. But you're making no progress and you're having no growth because you're not doing anything in your own sweet spot. So the organization is going to give you a great performance review every year. You're going to do fairly well. You're going to sit there and just oscillate around and do something that you never intended to do that you don't even care about. That is the unfulfilled zone. And we've got to break people out of that zone and move them into these target zones and these fulfillment zones. So the last piece is I want you to take a piece of white paper and I want you to draw these two axes on the paper. And for the next week or next 2 weeks, however ambitious you get, at the end of every hour, I want you to make a mark on the graph and think about what did you just complete in that past hour and what zone did it fall into. And then if you have, then I want you to send that to me and I will go through that. And we'll spend some time and we'll go through it together. And I'll help you design and engineer how you get into your sweet spot and how do you become truly effective. Because that's how you make progress to your roadmap. And then before I open it up for the last kind of questions and discussions, I try to be extremely active on this front and I try to do a lot of this work. If you follow me on LinkedIn, I have a weekly newsletter. You can get my newsletter at www.torigian.com/free newsletter. If you go on my newsletter, sign up. It comes out weekly. We missed 1 week here because of the election, but I try to keep it as weekly as possible. I have a different theme, a different concept. I talk about planning, organizing. I usually do a job of the week. I do an introduction of the week, different things like that. Follow me on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. I tweet about this stuff. I have at Eric Torigian on Twitter. Every week on LinkedIn, I do a crowdsourced question. So I call it a HR crowdsourcing thought, and I put a different question down there, and we get 3,000-4,000 views on it, and people give different input and thoughts on it. And I think this week's is open enrollment and how do you design benefit plans and how do you roll out benefit plans. And I'm just trying to create this narrative in HR. And again, I know that there's more than just HR people, but more people need to be involved in the narrative than just HR people. And then finally, send me an email, reach out to me directly, and I'd be happy to jump into conversation and to work on any of this stuff with you together. So Robert, let's turn it over for questions. We spend the last few minutes here with a question answer.
So either raise your hand and we'll unmute you, or put it in the chat box and either Eric or I will bring it up. Go ahead, Gail.
Eric, you rock. I mean, You are saying everything that is in my soul. So thank you. But I have a question that a long time ago, someone mentioned to me, when you get a new boss, you must leave. And as a good HR person, I'm saying, oh no, the company will recognize your good performance. But the longer I've been in business, I believe that's true. What do you think?
I respectfully do not agree with that at all. I think that you need to have the mindset, and let's not get into a loyalty discussion because I think loyalty is very, very important. I think you need to have the mindset that you are an HR professional consulting service with a customer of one. So let's say, for example, I'm working at Ford Motor Company and I am the manager of labor relations planning, and a new director of labor relations comes in. I don't think that means I have to leave. What I think that means to me is I need to show this person the value in purchasing and continuing my service, right? So if I was a landscape designer and I was doing the landscaping work at a house and the people sold that house, I wouldn't say, oh, well, I need to go find a new house to mow the lawns at, right? I would go to the new homeowner and I would help them see the value. And I'm going to keep using that word, it's critical. I will keep showing them the value that I add and why it's important to continue that relationship. When you get a new boss, your role becomes understand your value to the organization, understand where you add value, how are you moving the business plan and the strategy forward, and then now how can you help that person deliver against their goals. So the first discussion I have with any new boss is, what are your goals and objectives, and how do I help best drive them? How are those things driving the global mission? If the person's new to the company, I make sure they're connected to the global vision of the company and make sure they understand. I do everything about making them and our function successful. Why? Because the organization has us here for a reason. So most organizations have labor relations for a very important reason. They want to have effective manufacturing, and to have effective manufacturing in a unionized environment, you need to have very good labor relations who can help keep this thing moving. That's our job. So I would help my new boss see that job, see why it matters, see what I do to drive the value forward, and just keep moving in that direction. I hope that helps. It's a little bit of a contrarian view. But
No,
those
that
of you who know
really
me know
makes
that
a
that's
lot
my
of sense.
nature.
Yeah, thank you.
Um, Eric, there's another question. From a parent's perspective, what advice can you provide to recent college graduates in this economy and environment looking for a first position?
Well, first of all, I say you're the luckiest people that are there, because what a great time to graduate from college and what a great markets to enter into. So right now, the world's being redefined, and you have an opportunity to be part of that narrative and part of that redefinition. So I would challenge people to go out there and think about, again, the value proposition. How are you going to add value? So let's say you just graduated with your mechanical engineering degree, and you say, you know what? What's your passion? How do you want to make your mark on the world? Well, you know what? I love cars and I love driving fast. And okay, well, then let's figure out now, how do you take what you just learned and add value to an automotive manufacturer? Well, you know what? I think that a lot of things that cars are missing are really good braking systems. Okay, so now we've even fine-tuned it to the next level. So let's go and take your background and your experience and what you've gained and apply it to automotive braking, and where can we look and where can you break into that market, so to say, and how do you get into that and get started with that, and where will that lead you? And again, as a parent, I'll always like to preface with this. I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. So 6 years ago today, I was a much better parent than ever, because I think to be a good parent, you're a great parent when you don't have kids. As soon as you have kids, you realize that you're not really good at this. And really the whole key to this is making steps and just making progressive steps and finding the wins and finding the small places, and you know what, knowing when to just laugh and when to just say, okay, you know what, it is silly time. Let's just put the blankets over our head and laugh.
So Eric, a lot of HR people and even people outside of HR come to me and say, how do I start a business? So for those HR folks out there that might be retired or considering another path other than traditional employment, do you have any recommendations for those folks that want to start a consulting practice? And I put one other thing on that. We also have lawyers on the call, and the lawyers are self-employed. Do you have any recommendations for professionals, current professionals that want to increase their business?
Absolutely. And how many people, put your hand up right now if you think the next word on my mouth is going to be, where do you add value? Because that's where you have to start with your business, is where do you add value? Why should I contract with you? I'm trying to get a gas fireplace logs installed in my house, and I've called HVACs and plumbers, and someone even has directed me to the gas company last night, and I can't find anybody. I'm like, being a plumber must be the most incredible thing in the world, because you have zero accountability. They don't even call you back anymore. So if someone wanted to be a plumber, what I would tell you is, where can you add unique value into this space? Well, number one, if you could do customer service well, you will be the most incredible plumber there is. So I want you to think about the markets that you want to enter. I want you to look at them and say, how do I add value? And how do I have outstanding customer service? So if you want to be, you're just graduated with your MBA and you want to work in the PE world doing valuations on new companies, how can you add value? I add value by doing X. And then how are you unique? I'm unique by doing Y. And what I want you to get to is what you call your strap line. And your strap line is, and I usually have mine right up here in front of me, but my computer rebooted. But if you don't mind me taking 1 second, your strap line is going to sound something like this. I'm Eric Torigian, and I love to teach high performance people career strategies so they can live the life they deserve doing the work they love. Now, when I meet somebody and we're just in Kroger, hey, what do? You know what? I love to teach high performance people to go out and take their career, maximize it. I give them easy to implement strategies so they can go and live the life they deserve and do the work they love. Who am I? What value do I add? How is it unique? And what are you going to get from it?
Okay,
we did
have
a crowdsource on
go ahead,
strap
go ahead,
lining.
Chris. Unmute yourself, Chris.
Hey, hi everybody. Eric, thank you. First of all, thank you for doing this. This has been honestly, a lot more useful than I expected it to be. So it's been really fun so far. But
best compliment I've gotten in a while.
My question is, so my business that I just recently started in March is urban design research, which is something that's a little bit nebulous and abstract for a lot of the target market that I'm trying to serve, but does add value in kind of more long-term and like community building ways. So one of the biggest challenges that I've had has been to like distill all this design thinking, human-centered research, urban design stuff that I know add value because I've studied it into like a couple like very succinct points that like a developer or an architecture firm or like people like that are building in cities would understand like that. Like, yeah, that's why we need. So like, what advice would you have to like?
Well,
to take
number one, I don't ever want to hear you use the word nebulous again, because you're not nebulous, you're boutique. So you've got to think terminology matters, right? So you are not out there in some strange, unidentifiable, only understood by the most PhD people. No, that's not who you are. You are a boutique. You're a place where certain people go for very certain things. So you have a very boutique skill set, and it's available to this certain group of people who need it very strongly. Now you need to understand who are those customers and how are you going to flush them out, and then how are you going to add value to them. Like for example, and I hope she won't mind if I use her reference, but I've been talking to Alicia, I've been talking to your sister, and she actually has a lot of value and she's trying to add some very unique value. but we've been thinking through some very unique places to do it, right? So there's common places where you can bring your boutique skill set and get some unique things done. So instead of saying, well, look, I do this playscape design, I create these humanistic areas. Well, who's your market? Well, my market is cities and different places. Well, no, it's not. Your market should be landscapers, because landscapers go to individuals' homes. And we built a swing set in our backyard for our kids. And what does that look like? Well, it looks like I went to Costco and I bought a swing set and I brought it home in the company pickup truck and I put it together, and now it's just sitting there. So my landscaper who does my grass came to me and said, I can make that thing look a lot nicer for you. And he put 2x6s around it and dug it out and put French drains and a landscape cloth and then filled it with mulch. And you know what my kids now have in the backyard is a playground. So I took it from a swing set to a playground. And that's where her skill set can say, I can help people do that. But how do you advertise that? Where do you advertise it? Well, now you take your boutique skills and you find a way to invite as many people into your boutique as possible. And I know I'm oversimplifying it, and it's never quite this simple. And the journeys are always difficult and hard. But if you don't start taking the steps, you'll never get anywhere. There's a lot of people at home with dreams. They're sitting at home with their dreams. And there's a very few people who take those dreams and turn them into something.
Thank you.
It was, we went through the .com advertising era. God, I can't remember now. Maybe it might be 10 years ago, maybe even more. But there was one really good one from GoDaddy.com. And it was a guy sitting on a jet airplane, a private jet with like money all around him and, you know, a glass of champagne in his hand and all jewels hanging off of him, and laughing and saying, only difference between you and me is I actually went out and did it. And GoDaddy.com, go register your domain today. And I love the message of that. The only difference between Bill Gates and a lot of people who are sitting at home with some great mind is he went and did it, and he did it every day, and he found out where he could add value, and he made that value. And then
And
just
about
one
$40
last,
billion.
right? One last quote. Henry Ford, they asked him about customers and giving the customers what they need. And he said, if I had given the, and I don't know, this might be, it's attributed to him. It could be urban myth, but I like it. He said, basically, if I gave the customers what they need, I would have designed a faster horse. I gave them not what they wanted. I gave them what they needed. What they needed was a revolution in transportation. I don't want you to think about your new business as what do people need. I want you to turn into what do they want. So I don't sit and say people need a coach. People need a mentor in HR. Well, there's a million mentors and a million of those things. That's not what you want. That's not what you need. What you really want to get is someone who will coach you and walk alongside you in your career. And that's what I'm trying to do for people. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it did. Thanks.
See what we have here. Oh, by the way, this session is being recorded, so you can refer back to it. And also, if you have friends and colleagues that may be able to benefit from this, please share the recording with them. I'm trying to keep as much of this in the chat as possible, like Eric's email and his Twitter account and his website for you to refer back to. Do we have other questions? Eric, you want to start doing some wrap up here? And
yeah, well, the wrap up for me, Bob, would be very, very simple. Please keep the narrative going. Join the discussions. Turn into a net giver. Reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk to you. The best way is email, and you'll have a little bit. It might take me a day or two to respond, but I respond to every single one of them, and I sit and read them and give them some thoughtful insight. I'll be happy to help. I want to be part of your journey. You are going to be able to do things that have never been dreamed of before. Let's go and do it together.
Thank you, Eric. So what you just experienced is the Eric I've known for many years. He brings that level of energy and thought and logic. His journey and mine have been in the labor relations area, And what we've just seen now is something that goes way beyond that. Eric, thank you so much. It's been wonderful. Once again, can you give us your email and your website and your Twitter account in case people didn't pick it up?
Yeah, so email is eric@torigian.com. My site is, www.torigian.com is there. It's my site. You'll find everything on there. The newsletter is torigian.com/free newsletter. And all of this is on my LinkedIn too. My LinkedIn is Eric Torigian. Let's connect. Let's join with each other. And then Twitter is @EricTorigian.
Okay, one last opportunity for a burning question. Do I see any hands going up? I see no hands going up. Once again, thank you, Eric.
Thank
And
you.
thank you, everybody, for being on our LERA. We'll be back with you in January, and we'll keep you posted on the topics. Emily and Bernadette, as always, thank you for hosting this, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving, everybody.